Ma'am, which floor are you headed?
28th, please. I live here.
What kind of work do you do?
I work in law at the federal courthouse.
Let me see some identification.
Here it is. Everything is correct.
Doesn't look like...
You are detaining me without...
You're not telling me the whole story, ma'am.
The elevator doors closed with a quiet mechanical sound, trapping Judge Patricia Williams inside the small space with two police officers who had no idea they were about to ruin their own lives. It was 9:15 on a Tuesday night, and Patricia was heading home after another exhausting day at the federal courthouse. All day long, she had handled serious cases deciding the futures of criminals, corrupt officials, and people fighting for their civil rights. Patricia lived a quiet life in the Meridian Towers apartment complex, an expensive building known for its strong security, privacy, and respectful atmosphere. Residents paid high prices for peace of mind and professional treatment. But what was about to happen would completely destroy that sense of safety and prove that even a federal judge, still wearing her official robes, was not protected from the harsh prejudice that continued to exist in American society. Security cameras would later record every painful second of an encounter that would end to police careers, trigger a federal investigation, and shake the entire justice system. Before we go any further into this unbelievable story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will leave you stunned. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Judge Patricia Williams had spent the past 16 years building a flawless reputation on the federal bench. At 53 years old, she was respected for her sharp mind, strong sense of fairness, and firm commitment to justice. Lawyers, prosecutors, and fellow judges across the district admired her professionalism and authority. Her path to becoming a federal judge was far from easy. Raised in a working-class family, Patricia had to fight for every opportunity. She worked hard in law school, climbed the ranks in the prosecutor's office, and eventually earned her place on the federal bench through determination, discipline, and exceptional legal skill. Patricia lived alone in apartment 2847 at Meridian Towers, a luxury high-rise filled with doctors, executives, and other professionals who valued privacy and security. She had moved there 5 years earlier, drawn by the promise of a calm, secure place where she could unwind after long, stressful days in court. Building management took pride in offering residents a safe retreat from the outside world, complete with 24-hour concierge service, private elevators, and strict rules against unauthorized access to residential floors. That Tuesday had been especially draining. Patricia had spent more than 12 hours reviewing complicated fraud cases, listening to arguments in a major corruption trial, and writing legal opinions that would impact thousands of lives. She was completely worn out and looking forward to a simple evening, changing out of her robes, ordering dinner, and reading before going to bed. She had no idea her quiet night was about to turn into a nightmare, one that would reveal the darkest side of police misconduct and racial profiling. Officers Marcus Rodriguez and Kevin Thompson had been sent to respond to a noise complaint on the 14th floor. A resident had reported loud music coming from apartment 8426, and building security had called the police after failing to resolve the issue themselves. Rodriguez, a 7-year veteran, and Thompson, who had served for 12 years, had handled countless calls like this. It should have been routine, boring, even the kind of call that usually ended without any trouble. But something went wrong the moment they entered the building. The concierge on duty, a young man named David Chen, who had only been working the night shift for 3 weeks, made a serious mistake. When the officers asked about the noise complaint, David misunderstood and sent them to the wrong floor. Instead of heading to the 14th floor, Rodriguez and Thompson got into an elevator going up to the 28th floor, where Judge Patricia Williams lived in complete silence. The elevator ride that would change everything started off calmly. Patricia stepped in first, pressed the button for her floor, and leaned back against the wall, holding her briefcase and purse. She was still wearing her black judicial robe, planning to change when she got home instead of at the courthouse. The robe represented her authority and years of hard work, but it would offer no protection against what she was about to face. Rodriguez and Thompson entered just as the doors were closing. They noticed Patricia immediately, their eyes carefully scanning her in a way she recognized all too well. She gave them a polite nod, the kind people usually exchange in professional buildings, but neither officer responded. Instead, they stood in positions that made the small elevator feel tight and uncomfortable. Patricia shifted slightly, pressing herself against the back wall. It was a quiet, defensive habit she had developed over years of being in spaces where her presence seemed to make others uneasy. She had felt the judgment many times before, that silent doubt about whether she truly belonged. But this time felt different. This felt heavier, more aggressive, and more dangerous than the subtle slight she was used to. As the elevator slowly moved upward, Officer Rodriguez finally broke the silence with a question that instantly made Patricia uneasy. He asked her which floor she was going to, even though she had already pressed the button and the elevator was clearly moving toward the 28th floor. On the surface, the question sounded harmless, but the tone behind it carried suspicion that immediately made Patricia's heart beat faster. She answered calmly, saying she lived on the 28th floor and was heading home from work. Rodriguez and Thompson exchanged a quick look, one Patricia noticed from the corner of her eye. It was the kind of silent glance that suggested they didn't believe her, as if her answer raised doubts instead of clearing them. Then Thompson asked what kind of work she did. The question served no real purpose, but it felt like a challenge, as if she needed to justify her right to be in the building. Patricia paused briefly, thinking carefully. She could have said she worked in law, which was true but vague. She could have said she was a federal judge, which might have stopped the questioning immediately but could also sound like she was trying to pull rank. Or she could have refused to answer, reminding them she didn't owe strangers personal details in an elevator. She chose a balanced response, explaining that she worked in the legal field and was coming home from the federal courthouse. It was honest, respectful, and non-confrontational. Instead of calming the situation, her answer seemed to make things worse. Rodriguez stepped closer, invading her personal space and making the already small elevator feel tight and threatening. As the elevator continued to rise, each passing floor brought Patricia closer to her home, yet further from any sense of safety. What should have been a routine ride was turning into a confrontation that would expose the ugliest side of racial profiling in law enforcement. Patricia felt the tension growing. Years on the federal bench had taught her how to read power dynamics and recognize when a situation was escalating. Every instinct told her the officers were searching for a reason to detain her. What happened next would be recorded in clear detail by the elevator security camera, creating undeniable evidence of an encounter that would shock the legal world and confirm that racial profiling was still a destructive reality in American policing. Thompson moved even closer, his badge reflecting the harsh fluorescent light as he stood directly in front of her. He demanded her identification, claiming building security had reported suspicious activity on the upper floors. Patricia immediately knew this was a lie, but she also understood how dangerous the situation had become. In that confined space, pushing back too hard could make things spiral out of control. Keeping her voice steady, she reached into her purse and handed over her driver's license. Adrenaline rushed through her body, but her hands remained calm. Thompson examined the license far longer than necessary, then showed it to Rodriguez. Rodriguez compared the photo to Patricia's face as if she were a criminal suspect. The license clearly listed her address as apartment 2847 in Meridian Towers, confirming she lived exactly where she said she did. Still, Thompson didn't return the ID. Instead, he slipped it into his pocket and told her they needed to confirm her residency with building management. It was another excuse, another lie meant to stretch out an encounter that should have ended right there. Patricia immediately recognized the constitutional violations unfolding. She was being detained without cause, questioned without justification, and now had her identification taken illegally. But she also knew how dangerous it could be to argue with police in a tight, private space. She had seen cases where asserting basic rights led to false charges like resisting arrest. Suddenly, Rodriguez pressed the emergency stop button. The elevator jolted to a halt between the 22nd and 23rd floors. Patricia stumbled slightly and caught herself against the wall. She was now trapped in a 6-by-4-foot metal box with no witnesses and no easy way to escape. Thompson began asking why she was coming home so late and whether she had been drinking. The questions were meant to shame her, to turn her into a suspect, instead of a judge who had spent the day serving justice. Patricia answered calmly, explaining that federal court often ran late, and that she had been working on written opinions until she left. Her composure seemed to irritate them. Rodriguez accused her of being evasive and said her answers sounded rehearsed. He even suggested she might be involved in illegal activity in the building, like drug dealing or prostitution. The accusations were so outrageous and degrading that Patricia had to fight the urge to respond in anger. Thompson grabbed his radio and called dispatch, falsely reporting that they had detained a suspicious individual trying to access restricted floors. Patricia realized he was building a fake story to justify their actions. She knew that if this escalated, their version of events could outweigh hers. In that moment, Patricia made a critical decision. She quietly activated the voice recording app on her phone, which she was already holding. The phone stayed at her side, unnoticed by the officers. Years of legal experience had taught her that evidence mattered, and this recording might be her only protection. Rodriguez then ordered her to dump out her purse, claiming they needed to search for weapons or contraband. The demand was completely illegal. Patricia calmly refused, stating she had done nothing wrong and that they had no authority to search her belongings. Her refusal enraged Thompson. He grabbed her purse and dumped everything onto the elevator floor. Her wallet, keys, makeup, medications, and personal items scattered across the small space. Among them was her federal judicial ID card. Thompson picked it up and stared at it, his face shifting from confusion to disbelief and then to panic. He handed it to Rodriguez, whose face drained of color. They had just detained, searched, and harassed a federal judge, someone whose courtroom they might one day stand in as defendants. But instead of apologizing and ending the encounter, they made a fatal choice. Thompson claimed the judicial ID was fake, accusing Patricia of impersonating a federal judge. Rodriguez agreed, saying someone like her couldn't possibly hold such a position and that she needed to be arrested for fraud. In that moment, their actions revealed the full depth of their racial prejudice, their inability to accept that a black woman could hold one of the most powerful and respected roles in the American justice system. Even after seeing official ID that proved Patricia's identity and authority, their bias still wouldn't let them accept the truth. They would rather believe some huge, complicated crime plot than admit they had wrongly targeted someone who outranked them in every possible way. Patricia kept her voice calm and firm as she told them the facts. Detaining her was illegal, searching her was unconstitutional, and accusing her was defamatory. She warned them that if they kept going, it could lead to federal charges and would destroy their careers in law enforcement. But the officers didn't listen. By that point, they had already chosen a path that would ruin them. Thompson radioed for backup, claiming they had arrested a suspect for impersonating a federal judge and asking for units to come help transport her to jail for booking. That radio call later became key evidence because it showed he didn't simply make mistake. He decided to double down on his lies instead of stopping and apologizing. Rodriguez restarted the elevator, but instead of letting Patricia go to her apartment, he sent it down toward the ground floor, where more officers would be waiting. As the elevator moved down, Patricia continued recording everything. She knew the audio would matter, because it would prove their behavior had no real reason behind it. The elevator reached the lobby, with a mechanical ding that sounded like a death sentence for Rodriguez and Thompson's careers. When the doors opened, Patricia came face to face with 4 more officers who had responded to Thompson's fake emergency call. The Meridian Tower's lobby, usually calm, with marble floors and soft lighting, suddenly felt like a crime scene. Radios crackled, people gathered, and the quiet building turned chaotic in the exact way residents paid top dollar to avoid. Detective Sarah Mitchell stepped forward first. With 15 years on the job, she could tell immediately that something wasn't adding up. She had worked with Rodriguez and Thompson before and knew they could do their jobs, but the scene in front of her screamed trouble. A well-dressed woman in professional clothes was being treated like a dangerous criminal. Her personal items were scattered. Her dignity was being stripped away in front of building staff and residents who had come out to see what was happening. Patricia walked out of the elevator with the same controlled dignity she carried into her courtroom every day. Even after nearly 20 minutes of harassment, illegal detention, and racist accusations, she stayed composed. Her calm professionalism clashed sharply with the aggressive, desperate energy coming from Rodriguez and Thompson, who now seemed panicked as more witnesses watched. Detective Mitchell spoke in a steady tone and asked Patricia for her side. It was clear Mitchell sensed the mismatch between what the officers were claiming and what her own eyes were showing her. Patricia handed over her judicial identification card, and Mitchell examined it carefully under the bright lobby lights. Mitchell's expression changed instantly. She could see these were real federal credentials, belonging to one of the most powerful judges in the district. Thompson jumped in right away, insisting the ID was fake and demanding Mitchell arrest Patricia for impersonating a federal official. His voice had that sharp edge of panic. Everyone could hear the voice of someone who realized he messed up badly, but was too proud or too foolish to admit it. Rodriguez backed him up, adding more details to their made-up story about suspicious behavior and false credentials. But Detective Mitchell wasn't buying any of it. She pulled out her phone and made a call that permanently sealed their fate. Within minutes, she reached the federal courthouse and confirmed Patricia's identity, along with the fact that she was a sitting judge who had been in court that very day. The person on the other end of the call sounded shocked and alarmed that a federal judge had been detained and harassed. They promised the incident would be investigated at the highest level. The lobby went quiet when Mitchell ended the call and turned back to Rodriguez and Thompson. Her voice was cold, controlled, and professional as she told them the truth. They just committed career suicide. Patricia Williams was a federal judge, her credentials were real, and their detention of her was a serious federal civil rights violation that would be prosecuted fully. Both officers went pale as reality finally broke through their racist assumptions. That's when Patricia revealed something that took away their last chance to twist the story. She calmly said she had recorded the entire encounter, from the first questioning in the elevator, to the harassment, to their behavior. After they found her credentials, every word had been captured in clear audio. She told everyone present that the recording would be handed over to federal investigators, and then more evidence came forward. The building's security director, James Walsh, walked out with a grim look and a laptop. The elevator cameras had recorded everything in high-definition video. Walsh explained that the footage clearly showed Rodriguez and Thompson harassing a resident for no reason, carrying out an illegal search, and then making up charges when they realized who she was. Patricia's audio and the building's video together made the truth undeniable. By then, word of what happened had already reached the highest levels of both the police department and the federal judiciary. Patricia's phone started ringing calls from judges, court staff, and legal colleagues who had heard what was going on. Each call increased the pressure on the police department to act fast and take this seriously. Rodriguez tried one last desperate move to save himself. He suggested Patricia must have provoked the situation, or that what they did was normal police procedure, but his words meant nothing in a lobby full of witnesses who could see exactly what happened. No reasonable person could watch the footage or hear the recording and think Patricia had done anything wrong. She was just trying to go home after a long day. Detective Mitchell then did something rare and serious. She placed Rodriguez and Thompson under immediate arrest for federal civil rights violations. Their badges and weapons were taken right there in the lobby. They were handcuffed in the same place where they had tried to humiliate a federal judge. The irony was obvious to everyone. Now they were feeling the same loss of dignity and freedom they had tried to force on an innocent woman. News spread quickly, and reporters arrived within hours. Courthouse staff and legal insiders tipped them off because they understood how massive this was. Federal judges almost never end up in police confrontations, and when they do, it usually means something has gone terribly wrong. Reporters gathered outside Meridian Towers and tried to speak with residents and witnesses. Patricia refused to speak to the media that night. Instead, she focused on documenting everything and speaking with civil rights attorneys who specialized in police misconduct. She knew her response mattered not just for her, but for what it would mean going forward. The police department's internal affairs unit opened an investigation immediately, but federal authorities stepped in quickly and took control. When a federal judge is illegally detained and harassed, it isn't just a local issue. It becomes a serious matter tied to civil rights and judicial independence. The FBI opened a civil rights investigation within 24 hours, and federal prosecutors began reviewing the evidence to decide what charges to file. When investigators saw the footage and heard the audio, they were stunned. The evidence was clear, detailed, and bold. There was almost no room for denial. It showed obvious racial profiling, illegal detention, and abuse of power captured in multiple ways. And it pointed to something even worse. This likely wasn't the first time. The behavior looked like a pattern, something these officers may have done to other people who didn't have Patricia's status, knowledge, or resources to fight back. The legal community reacted with anger and fear. Judges, lawyers, and court staff understood what this meant. If a federal judge could be treated this way, what chance did an ordinary citizen have when facing officers who already saw them as suspicious? The incident became a loud reminder that racial profiling was still real, that accountability and training were still failing in too many places. Patricia's fellow judges rallied around her. Several released public statements condemning what happened and calling for real reforms. They made it clear that attacking one judge was an attack on the integrity and independence of the entire court system. The Meridian Towers management also found itself under pressure. They had promised resident security and respect, but now a resident had been detained and humiliated inside the building. People started asking serious questions about how safe the building really was, and what procedures existed when law enforcement entered the property. Management responded quickly by changing policies. From that point forward, any police officer entering the building would need to be escorted by security and provide clear justification for any contact with residents. As the story spread, it became obvious that Rodriguez and Thompson's careers were finished. No police department would want officers caught on camera illegally detaining a federal judge. The legal and financial liability alone would follow them forever. The case soon became something bigger than one bad night. It turned into a major case study in police academies and law schools, an example of how racism, ego, and abuse of power can destroy careers and violate constitutional rights. Federal prosecutors moved fast. With strong evidence and national attention, they filed serious charges including deprivation of civil rights under color of law, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to violate constitutional rights. Each charge carried major prison time, and the total sentence could reach 16 years if they were convicted on everything. The case sent shockwaves through law enforcement across the country. It was a warning that racial profiling and abuse of power would not be ignored, no matter who the victim was, and no matter what uniform the officers wore. Patricia's decision to record the encounter and push for federal charges ended up protecting many future victims who might otherwise suffer in silence. The trial that followed became a landmark civil rights case. Rodriguez and Thompson were convicted on all charges after just 4 hours of jury deliberation. The evidence was overwhelming, and both officers received the maximum sentence: 16 years in federal prison. Afterward, Judge Patricia Williams used her experience to become a strong voice for reform and police accountability. She created a foundation focused on documenting and preventing racial profiling, making sure future victims had support and resources to fight back. Her decision to pursue justice through the system rather than chasing attention became an example of courage and discipline. The Meridian Towers incident became required material in police academies and law schools nationwide, a perfect storm of stupidity, racism, and abuse of power that destroyed 2 careers while pushing civil rights forward. Rodriguez and Thompson learned too late that in America, justice doesn't ignore constitutional violations, no matter the badge, the rank, or the uniform. This case was brutal, but the case on the right-hand side is even more insane.